What's up, everybody? Marvel the Cross 316 back on another comic book flashback. And today, folks, we are looking at Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 75. We got the big grand 75 issue today. And so, what a cool time to be in right now as we're looking at the Hobgoblin Part 4, folks. We're continuing this storyline where we think that Harry Osborn is going to become the Hobgoblin. And so we're not going to see Hobgoblin in this issue, but we will see things further develop here. And so 2 days ago, we saw that Harry Osborn was confronted by this man named Mr. Shaw. He worked for his father, Harry Osborn's father, Norman Osborn, and he brought Harry to this cellar, and inside is what we see with all the Oz formula, all of the Green Goblin's gadgets. It's pretty cool how he has these different Green Goblin masks here. One from the Spider-Man movie, one from the Ultimate Universe, and then it looks like one from the regular universe, which is pretty cool. If you look throughout this issue, there's those tiny little details here. Also, you see that there's a stack of cash here, so that's interesting. And so what we see here is that Harry Osborn is looking around and he's just amazed to see all this. And we see that Mr. Shaw says, when your dad found it, he outfitted it as this. I don't know, a mini Oscorp. The shield can't see it. No one knows it's here. Invisible Oscorp. And he says, last time your dad broke out of shield custody, he didn't come here. Guess it's because he was dragging all of his fellow inmates around with him. Guess he didn't trust them. Then we see all of a sudden Harry Osborn snaps and he's like, no, get away from me. And he runs out of the cellar. And we see that Mr. Shaw is going to chase after Harry and tackles him. And he said, kid, calm down. And he said, no, he killed my mother. He said, kid, he's a monster. And then he slaps Harry in the face. He says, shut up. He said, oh, God, please, he killed her. Mr. Shaw says, this isn't working like I hoped. So what is that in reference to? There's something very strange with Mr. Shaw, as we see in this issue. And the reason for it is that he's using Harry for something, and I don't exactly know why, but we're going to find out probably next issue. See, Harry passes out, and he's like, sleep it off, kid. You sure ain't your father. So we see that when Harry Osborn recovers from his sleep, he's back in New York, and he's like, where am I? Mr. Shaw says, where does it look like? You're back in New York. You're home. Harry says, we were in the car? So Harry doesn't even remember going to that cellar and looking at his dad's secret hideout. So it's very strange here that he doesn't remember that. Mr. Shaw says, you fell asleep on me. I took you home. And then we see that Harry's like, that doesn't make sense. He said, what time is it? He said, it's in the middle of the night. Keep it down. You'll wake your grandpa. He said, we were in a car? We were going to go for a ride and have a talk. About what? About what? About your father. I told you I don't know where he is. And then what we're going to see here is Mr. Shaw's intentions here is that he wants Harry Osborn to basically go back to high school, talk with Peter Parker because he's Spider-Man. For some reason, Mr. Shaw knows that Peter is Spider-Man because remember, Mr. Shaw worked for Norman Osborn, and Norman Osborn also knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And so he says that he wants Harry to find out details of where Norman Osborn's at and where he's being held because Norman Osborn is dying. He's dying of the Oz drug, and he doesn't want Harry's dad to die in vain. And he wants, basically, he comes up with the excuse to say that, Harry, you don't have your mom now. Your dad is all that you have left, and you need to go find out where he's at. And so he convinces Harry, and that's Harry's entire mission is to talk with Peter Parker to find out where his father's at. So that's what we see here. Mr. Shaw also reveals in this issue that Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. does not know that Mr. Shaw exists. And he says there's a 50-50 chance S.H.I.E.L.D. has a round-the-clock surveillance on your little Spider-Man friend, and that's not a chance I'm going to take. No, I can't go near him. I owe your dad my life. I owe your dad everything. He doesn't deserve to die like this. He deserves something more. Talk to Peter. And so that's what we saw from last issue when Harry called Peter on the phone and he said that he needed to meet him and bring the costume. Well, we see that Aunt May is not going to allow Peter to walk out of the house because it's 8 p.m. and it's too late. And Peter gets all mad and stuff. So he's not able to go anywhere and surprised he didn't sneak out of the house to go meet Harry. So the next day at school, Mary Jane's walking with Liz Allen when she says, MJ, look. And here comes Peter, and he won't even look at Mary Jane because Peter Parker is still mad at Mary Jane. And Liz says, oh man, you weren't kidding. He is mad at you. And so we see that they're supposed to have this test that they were studying for last issue. MJ keeps looking at Peter. She's wondering why Peter is so mad and can they make amends. We see that the teacher gets on to Mary Jane because she's looking at Peter and he says, eyes on your own paper, Mrs. Watson. So after class ends, school lets out for basically, for lunchtime. And Mary Jane's going to look for Peter and she finds him up in the bleachers in the football stadium. He's eating lunch alone. And she says, I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Harry. He keeps eating, and then she says, I said I'm sorry I didn't. He said, okay, okay. And she says, do you believe me? Do you believe me that I liked you more than him? He said, that's not the point. He said, what is it then? He said, why, if I liked Harry so much, why wouldn't I just be with him? Why would I go through all of this with you? He said, I don't think you always know what you want. So, that's not a good answer. Mary Jane said, like, this isn't about Harry, is it? This is about Harry's dad, isn't it? He said, I told you you're not safe being around him or any of the Osborns, and you're not safe with me. And then she says, look, I know what happened in your last fight. I know that you fought Harry's dad, and I know that you didn't mean to kill him. He said, huh? He said, you didn't mean to kill Harry or Harry's dad. It was just in self-defense, right? He said, Harry told you I killed his dad? And MJ says, but you didn't, right? He said, no, it was self-defense. He said, Harry's dad is not dead. He said, I can't believe this. Why would Harry tell this to you? And she's wondering the same thing. And she's like, I don't understand why would Harry say that. And then Peter says, because he's nuts. He said, where are you going? And so we see that Harry Osborn didn't go to school the next day. Instead, he stayed home, and Mr. Shaw was not happy about that. He says, we had a deal. So for some reason, Mr. Shaw really wants to see Harry's dad, but we see that Spider-Man is going to show up on the scene and confront Harry. And for some reason, Spider-Man doesn't acknowledge the presence of Mr. Shaw, which is kind of weird here. It's almost as if Harry's talking to himself, and Spider-Man notices here. So is Mr. Shaw real? That's the big question in this issue. Is Mr. Shaw just a figment of Harry's imagination, or is Spider-Man just ignoring Mr. Shaw's presence? That's what we got to worry about here. But we see that it looks like Mr. Shaw is just making Harry very uncomfortable here, making him relive his memories of how his dad became the Green Goblin. This is going way back to the beginning of this series, and Harry was there. He saw what happened with the explosion, and something happens within Harry's own body. Something very strange here. This combustible elements and Harry then catches on fire. And so that is how we end this issue, folks. What the heck is going on with Harry, and why is his body bursting into flame? Is this him becoming the Hobgoblin? Is the Hobgoblin and the Ultimate Universe have something to do with fire powers? We'll find all this out coming up next in issue number 76. But before then, go ahead now and give this video a like, comment down below what you liked about this issue, subscribe if you have not, and I will catch y'all in the next one.